Moving from department to department was half the fun.
Hallie's was fun because they had the woman who worked the elevator, and that was fun. I used to like to watch her. In fact, my sister and I would go home and we had a glass sliding door on our bathtub, and we used to play Hallie Elevator Lady.
People who worked at Higbee's and ran these elevators were mostly young girls in high school, and even a couple of my aunts and my husband's aunts as young teenagers ran elevators. And it was very prestigious because you wore white gloves, and it was a very proper sort of job.
And it was a whole core of people, the young ladies that would do it. They went through training classes, how to greet the people, how to proceed to operate the elevator. It was actually a training class for running the elevator. First off, they would push a button that was on the outside, and then that would light up on this panel showing right here what floor the operator needed to go to. So the person would just close the door, just like this. And once they would get to the floor, they would just open the door on the handle like that. Greet the person, have them come in, and just have a conversation with them, talk to them, ride them to their floor, and tell them which was located on all that different floors.
The other thing I remember about O'Neill's were their beautiful elevator girls. And there was always a captain, and she stood out in front and had a little clicker and let each girl know when the elevator should go on its way.
I was a kid. I was an escalator person. I love the escalator. It was sort of like almost like an amusement park ride to a certain extent, because you know you're going up and around, and you could see all the things that are going around too.
I always enjoyed the escalators as a kid. You know, if I had to ride them, they got narrower and narrower and narrower, and we knew we were getting near the top when they were real narrow, and I couldn't stand next to my brother.
The other thing was our escalators at Higbee's, the new escalators to the front of the store, moved quite quickly. There was a verve about going into Higbee's. When you jumped on the escalator, you were shot to the next floor. And you really had to plan your strategies getting on and getting off.
I do remember Higbee's, and up until a few years ago, they still had the old wooden trade escalators. And they rattled and creaked and everything, and I do remember those as a kid, a little bit leery to get on it because they were rackety old things.
Some of the greatest memories of downtown are centered around food. The busy shopper could always get a bite to eat at the locally owned fast food restaurants and diners of the day. In Akron, it might be corned beef at the Stone's Grill or hot rolls at Kazi's. Clevelanders recall the Clark's restaurant's treasure chest for kids, Huff Bakery's cakes and cookies, and Bouquer's mile-high sundaes. And you probably couldn't go wrong with a stop at the corner diner or dime store luncheonette.
Maybe once a week, when my mom would give me the money, I would have my lunch at the lunch counter in Woolworth. They had about the best chicken pot pie you'd ever know. I'd get that for 25 cents and 5 cents for a Coke.
I'd go over to Kresge's or Woolworth's and sit at the lunch counter there. And yeah, very fond memories of that kind of food operation. They were bazaars, if you will. They were very interesting. They were fun places.
We would have the whole place jam-packed. The people all seemed to walk all down East 9th Street. And I was really crowded. Boss came in. After it was all over, he checked the register and he says, "You took in over $100 all by yourself." And it was, hamburgers were 15 and coffee was 10. So I did pretty good.
Another simple dining experience was clearly a downtown favorite.
We would end the day by going to, and I have great memories of that, I'd be ready to pig out, is to go to the Forum, which was up on 9th Street. Cherry pie, chicken, fill my plate, maybe go back a second time for a second helping.
Well, you'd walk in and you'd pick up your tray and everything, and then you could just go down this line and you got to choose your food. And I always had their roasted potatoes and probably chicken. That was my favorite lunches.
It was a very nice cafeteria. It's like a school cafeteria, but it wasn't as formal as some of the other places downtown.
I don't know if you remember the old Forum. You know, very popular, very popular. when it up and disappeared, a lot of people was heartbroken because a lot of times people would just come down for that evening meal, you know, because they had such a diverse selection of foods there, you know, and I, as a child, you know, I really enjoyed coming down there. A lot of times when we got through shining shoes, we would go get us a dinner.
For dessert or a treat, you had to stop and get something that could only be bought in Cleveland, a concoction with a taste all its own, the Frosty.
I guess the thing that really stands out in my mind more than anything, especially being a kid, is the last thing we would do before we went home is go to Higbee's for their malted. And, I mean, that was like the highlight of the entire day.
We're in the lower concourse of Higbee's, and this is approximately where the Frosty Bar used to be. And when you came into Union Station from your train, it wasn't a trip unless you came into Higbee's and had a great Frosty.
They were so popular at Higbee's that Mays somehow got the secret recipe and built their own Frosty Bar.
Ah, yes, the legendary Frosty Bar at May Company's. Now, that would be one of the places you'd have to stop. Go to May Company, go down there, and you get a little glass, and they fill it with a nice, cool little chocolate Frosty, and
Oh, the frosted malts. That was the original milk mustache. When you got in the basement of both stores, you could buy a frosted malt.
Fear not, you can still get an original recipe Frosty.
This is the machine that the Frosty was developed on. Now, most people had it at Higbee's, or some people say May Company. And that was after it had been developed here and the recipe borrowed. I had to be good all day when I was a kid to get one of these, and they cost 15 cents at the time.
It turns out that Mr. Weber, founder of Weber's Custard and Ice Cream in Fairview Park, is recognized as the originator of that unique Frosty recipe. Today, David Ford continues the tradition using these rare 69-year-old machines.
It turned out to be an excellent sales tool. They never gave you a spoon, so once you're busy eating it, you're eating it down about that far, it won't come out until the heat of your hand basically warms it, and then when you're going like this, it'll slide down and get you on the nose. I was hoping it'd be more liquid.
It's one of those tastes of Cleveland, especially as a kid. He's like, as soon as you taste it, you remember going, yeah, I remember this from downtown.
I have that all the time. People come in, they taste this, and they're just blown away. They just, I mean, you can see the years drop off their faces. They become children again. We had one woman start crying. She said, oh, my mother just passed away, and I remember when she took me, you know, when I was a child, down to Higbee's, down the basement to get it. And that's everyone's experience. They immediately, as soon as they taste it, it takes them back to their childhood. It's like the cheapest time machine you can think of.
Another great part of being downtown was all the restaurants. In Akron, there was the Garden Grill or the Georgian Room. In Cleveland, people fondly remember Hallie's Tea Room or the Mayfair Room. But the place that sparks the most affection was on Higbee's 10th floor.
We would go to Higbee's and then we would stop for our lunch at the Silver Grill.
What's special about it is the fact that it is a reminder of a period of time when all department stores in the United States, Canada, Europe had tea rooms and restaurants.
First of all, the Silver Grill was a beautiful restaurant. It was a perfect example of Art Deco architecture. It had very good food. It was a great place for businessmen to meet for lunch. Ladies who lunched in those days lunched there.
Even though it was a grown-up place with beautiful table settings, linen tablecloths, and real silverware, it also holds a special place in the heart of many boys and girls.
This is the truck that little boys used to have their lunches taken in.
It was kind of like the original Happy Meal. In the Silver Grill's early days, children would be given their meals in a wooden buffet like this one that was brought to the table. Later on, small metal toy stoves were used, but they stayed at the Silver Grill. And then, kids were given cardboard souvenir stoves to take home, as well as barns, a space capsule, and the famous Higbee's truck.
So these were kinds of ways that children certainly were a part of this experience, which was very, very clever merchandising as well, because again, it made children welcome, to partake of all the other kinds of opportunities of seeing what a department store was like.
Now, we've been talking about the Silver Grill in the past tense. It's true it's no longer open, but the space still exists. As thousands of others did, we took the elevator up to Higbee's 10th floor. With us is Ann Zapancic, who ran the kitchen there for 20 years.
I remember how crowded the long lines we used to have.
She hasn't been here since the day it closed in 1989. The sign still greets us, but struggles to do so.
Lots of memories here. Remember the fish pond there? We used to have a lot of fish there.
All the original chairs and tables dating back to 1932 are here, stacked neatly. The silver grills look the same as they did the day it opened. The goldfish pond, home to thousands of fish who entertain kids and adults for more than 50 years. Time feels like it's standing still here on the 10th floor of Higbee's. You can almost imagine sitting down and ordering one more serving of beef stroganoff at the Silver Grill.
To this day, people still discuss the Silver Grill.
Coming up next on The Way We Shopped, it's Christmas in the city with the magic of beautiful window displays, the Sterling Lindner tree, and Santa's #1 elf, Mr. Jingling. But first, take a moment to call W. Minorities were able to experience many of the joys of downtown, but they didn't always have the same positive shopping experiences that others remember.
We were not allowed to eat. They would close the booth when you would go in order to eat. They would say, this is not open and we cannot serve you.
You would find different clerks that would not wait on you, would make excuses why they couldn't wait on you.
Bob Render's mother told him the story of the day she went to buy a dress, and all but one of the clerks refused to help her.
But you could communicate through body language that that's what they were saying. You know, one, what are you doing here in the department store, let alone what are you doing in this particular department? But she said there was a woman that got up from the couch, went to her, treated her very kindly and very graciously, asked her what could she help her. And she formed a very good relationship. She said it was a Jewish woman who waited on her. And from that point on, she would find out when this woman was on duty, what her off days were, and if the schedule rotated, she would find out all of that and made sure that she saw that particular clerk.
While some stores were a problem for minority shoppers, many, such as Rosenblum's, were happy to service minority clients.
Well, they started servicing the black community. We got credit. You know, it's one of the first places down here to do it. That's where these boots came from. These are 30-year-old boots. They were courteous. They were friendly.
In Akron, African Americans who were shunned at some of the stores along Main Street spent their money at shops on Howard Street, which sought out minority shoppers. But things changed for the better when many of the downtown department stores took active roles in civil rights.
Higbee's, for instance, pioneered in integrating sales staffs. And sales staffs were eventually integrated. And essentially by the 60s and 70s, blacks were shopping at the downtown department stores.
They were just beginning to hire blacks. I went down and applied for it. And they hired me. I was surprised.
Pleasant surprises also awaited many downtown Cleveland shoppers who took a chance and ventured off the beaten path.
There was a mystery about downtown, I guess, a little bit. Not only the big stores, but then you'd go to, say, like Prospect. And that was kind of like a little bit of those forbidden zones. It was a little bit grittier on Prospect, but they had Record Rendezvous. You walk in that old record store, and there was just racks and racks of all these great albums and everything that you didn't find in the regular chains.
I bought these on January 23rd, 1960.
Lois Denny was at Record Rendezvous that day. She knows that because, like a lot of teenage girls, she wrote it all down in her diary.